Happy New Year, everybody, and a huge thank you to Kim and Michael and John for your support on PayPal. I really appreciate it. This video is just going to be a big jumble of a mess of thoughts and feelings because I'm a big jumble of a mess. It's a little different. I'm in Vegas right now visiting my dad, and it's interesting. I love my dad so much, and I've talked about him before on the channel, but so we grew up very morally conservative. I've said that before. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I received my first communion. I made it all the way through confirmation before my views on homosexuality actually got me thrown out of my church because I openly questioned our deacon on some statements that he made. Anyway, so my dad has always been, pro-life, pro-traditional marriage. And for some reason, the last couple years, he's really gone in this completely other direction. And while he still remains very morally conservative, he's become really progressive politically, and to the point where he still thinks the Clintons are somehow good people. He still thinks that Obama was the best president we've had in he can think of. And so this trip has been interesting with trying to decide how much I should say, how much do I push back. My dad's not a young guy. He had me when he was in his 40s, and he and my stepmother both have just gone down this rabbit hole of wokeness that I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get them out of it. I've been here for 2 days now, and I'm trying to drop red pills whenever I can, but I haven't outright told them that I am or I will be a Trump voter in 2020, because I guess I'm still kind of scared of what would happen and how they'd respond. And I don't really know what to do on that. So I'm gonna table that, and if any of you have suggestions on how to gently red pill your parents, that would be great. But there's something else that's been going on in my life, and I'm working this out with with friends, with Mike, with my brother John, that I've talked about before as well. But I think I'm really having what people would probably describe as like a crisis of faith, but maybe it's more appropriate to say it's like a crisis of anti-faith. How do I explain it? I'm such a jumble, and forgive me. I don't normally like to make videos when I'm this when I'm this confused, or I'm this unsure of my own thoughts and feelings, but I felt like I have loved and enjoyed the community that we've built here so much. And I'm not here for fans. I'm not here for followers. I really want to be able to just get back to that place of talking about things, discussing things. And one of the things I love about my dad, and I've loved this about him my whole life, is that no matter how morally conservative he is, no matter how much he has stuck to his Catholic faith, he has always been there for me as I've been on my own spiritual journey. And even when I was outright denouncing God, he never wavered in his support for me, and he never treated me like the questions that I had were wrong, or blasphemous, even though technically they were. But you know, he's always just been my go-to guy for questioning religion. And that's where I've been the last few months now, really, probably longer. But you know, I grew up in the Catholic Church, and my whole worldview shattered when my parents announced that they were getting a divorce. Up until that very night, they had always raised me that, you know, marriage is something that's forever. Marriage is final. You know, a husband and wife's duty to one another is incredibly important. So when they came to me when I was 8 and told me that their marriage was ending and I would need to decide which one of them I wanted to live with, it completely set me on this destructive path that shaped my decisions, shaped my life for decades. And I guess if I can, I don't really like offering advice, and I don't really like telling people what to do, but if I could make any suggestion to parents that are very religious, I strongly urge you to be very careful about what you press on your children, what you tell your children. If somewhere in your heart there's a doubt about your marriage, don't tell your children that marriage is forever. And I don't even know if that's like the right thing I should say. I can only come from the perspective of someone whose parents split up. And there's a lot of people out there like me, and it'd be interesting to see, you know, those of you that come from religious families like mine, how, you know, if you had a divorce, how did you react to it? How did you interpret it? Because I went completely off the rails. It totally shattered my thoughts on God and faith and everything, because it just felt to me like they lied to me. You know, I'd been lied to about, you know, this idea that marriage was this secure, you know, supportive partnership that you made with someone you loved very much and that you were going to love for the rest of your life. And it ended up having this domino effect in my life, where I thought, if they lied to me about that, if they misrepresented our faith about that, what else did they lie about? What else have they been hiding from me? And it made me, eventually, I actually turned to Anti-Theism, which I was an anti-theist for many years, and a very aggressive one. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically like a step up from atheism. Really diehard anti-theists look at atheists like, you're not doing enough. You haven't gone far enough. It's the idea that even if God exists, I reject him. Even if everything I've heard about religion, about the Christian faith is true, I reject it. And it really centered on my anger at my parents, my anger at the universe, my anger at God for you know, shattering this wonderful family that I'd grown up in, because my parents never fought in front of us, so I had no idea this was happening. It really destroyed my life right when it could have been taking off, or, you know, it could have been going in a totally different direction. And I went down such a dark path for, oh gosh, 20 years. 20 years of drugs and casual sex, and just going between intense bouts of feeling worthless, then, you know, going in the total opposite direction of becoming very fired up and becoming very confident and falsely confident, if that makes sense. So the last couple years, I've really changed how I felt. I've talked about this as well. I had the immense pleasure or the honor of getting to know some conservatives, getting to know more religious people than I've ever known before when I started getting into community theater. A lot of that's done in churches, and so I ended up sort of being forced to interact with people who believe in God and believe in Christ, when up until that point I'd spent decades avoiding them or outright ridiculing them. And it really changed how I looked at people. I got to know them, I got to trust them, I got to have conversations with them, and it really showed me that my assumptions were totally wrong and that I'd misjudged people of faith. So that in turn opened me up to starting to talk to people about my lack of faith. And my boyfriend, Mike, he also has been going on this journey of spirituality and embracing Christ and embracing God, and he's gone, you know, he's totally on board with it. And I still remain resistant. And before I left, we were actually starting to argue a little bit about it, because he really wants me to at least become more open to this. And now that we're talking about starting a family, there's the whole thought of, you know, that moral structure and what kind of moral compass are we going to give to them. So all of this is just swirling in my head about my thoughts on God, my feelings on God, my rejection of faith for so many years. And before I left, Mike was asking, you know, I don't understand why you don't even want to think about accepting God again. And I don't understand how someone who came from such a spiritual and religious background could be so adamant to refuse God's love. And I think even though I'm struggling a little bit with my dad on Trump and, you know, that whole political mess, we sat down this morning and had a long talk with him about God and about my own path and about where I've been and what I think. And it really hit me that I think the reason I don't want to think about accepting God is because I don't think I'm worthy. I don't know if I'm worthy of his love. And you know, everyone, when I say that, because it was something I talked about today to my dad, and then I talked about it with my brother John and Mike, and it's always the same response of, you know, everybody's worthy. God forgives everybody. But I don't know if I'm worthy of forgiveness. I don't know that it's right having spent so many years, you know, outright rejecting it, outright rejecting faith, when I think about all the times that I disrespected my dad, that I disrespected my brother because they committed the crime of believing in God, and when I think about all the times that I said horrible things to Christians and anyone of faith online, you know, you can go back to my tweets from 10 years ago and see this just sad, angry person, you know, angry at God for what I felt like was abandonment. And yet I have to admit that, you know, I'm here. I'm here because of, if you want to call it God's grace, if you want to call it divine intervention, but I shouldn't be here, or I didn't think I should be here. And when I tried to kill myself, I told myself, as I was swallowing all these pills, if I wake up from this, it's a sign. It's a sign that I have a purpose. It's a sign that I'm not done yet. It's a sign that I have things to accomplish. And when I look back on it now, all I think of is shame, because I did survive, and I did wake up, and I still rejected God. I still turned my back on my faith, even though it was right there, showing me that I wasn't done yet, that I had things to do. And I think about all the unsafe, dangerous positions I put myself in. Sometimes I've been assaulted twice in my life, and the first time, looking back as it on an adult, you know, I don't like saying you blame the victim, but I put myself in dangerous situations with men that I didn't know, that I thought I could trust, that I thought were friends, that I didn't know well enough to say they really were. And while it is always on, the fault is always on the person who decides to rape. But you have the power to decrease your chances of becoming a victim. And ever since I made that realization, ever since I started really thinking about my own safety, thinking about respecting my own body, I've never been in that situation again. I've never had anyone disrespect my boundaries once I set them. And I know that that's not the case for everybody. I'm not talking for everyone, and I don't speak for every, you know, survivor. I only can speak for myself and my own experiences. But I keep looking back at all these messed up things that I made it through, and not once did I thank God for getting me through it. And I think now that I'm really starting to really look back on my life, you know, now that I'm thinking about wanting to be a parent, and now that we're talking about starting a family, I'm really assessing my life in a way I didn't expect, and thinking about, you know, the lessons that I could teach that I want to teach my children, the example that I want to set for them. And I think about all the stupid stuff I've done, all the times I could have died, all, you know, all the times that I could have OD'd, or I could have, you know, the stupid things that kids do to get out of their house so they can go get high. And somehow, not only am I still here, but I'm in the best place I've ever been in my entire life. And I know this is getting long. I know this is a long video, and if you're still watching, I really appreciate it, because I could really use some suggestions and use some encouragement, because all I keep thinking about is that I don't deserve forgiveness. And it has nothing to do with the horrible things I've done. You know, I feel like those things can be forgiven. But can the outright, almost you know, not, I guess, the outright, like, emotionally violent rejection of God and faith for as long as I lived that way, I don't know if I deserve to even ask for forgiveness. I think that's what it is. I don't even feel like I deserve to ask for it. And sorry, guys. I just have so many years of anger and frustration and feelings of betrayal, feeling like God let me down, you know, God betrayed me, and coming to the realization that I in fact betrayed God, you know? And is there any cause for forgiveness or redemption for my betrayal against him? And I don't know. I don't know. But in a couple days, I'll be getting back on a plane, and flying is the most frightening thing for me. I hate it with everything in my being. And I felt like if something were to happen, if I end up, you know, if some, God, I don't, but I just, God, yeah. You know, if something were to happen to me and I didn't make it, how would I feel not acknowledging how awful I feel about my behavior, and how guilty I feel about the way I lived my life? I just, if anything happens, I didn't want to have, you know, the last thing I ever said publicly to be about a border wall or Patreon or things that ultimately, when you're facing death, mean nothing. And thinking about the example that I want to set for my future children and the kind of person that the kind of adult that I want to be, I just couldn't not say something and not ask that question of, you know, what do you do when you feel so guilty for how vocally and how passionately you spoke against your creator. I don't know if I can come back from that. I don't know if I can be forgiven for that. And I feel shame in even thinking that I could be forgiven. So, all right, I'm almost at 30 minutes. Let's end it there. But I wanted to say to everybody, you know, thank you. Thank you for being here. I have genuinely appreciated the connections that I've made here. Not just with conservatives, but I've met so many amazing people that are on the left, people that would say they're liberals, people who still vote Democrat, but there still a lot of good people in that party. And I think both sides have to deal with the bad apples in our carts, but these last few months I've made so many great connections with people, and I appreciate that. So I don't know how to end this on a positive, but got a lot on my mind, and I'm gonna leave it there. I don't know what else to say. Now it's awkward. But thank you, everyone. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. And if you're going through something similar or you've been through something similar, I'd really like to hear from you. So take care, and I hope you continue to have a great 2019. I hope very much, despite my incredible fear of flying, I'm crossing my fingers. Everything will be great. I will be back. I'll be back on the East Coast next week, and I will be making more videos. And I really appreciate everyone that reached out to see how I was doing, to see what was up, to see what was taking me so long to post something. And it was all kind of wrapped around being afraid to fly, and just having so many different things going on in my head right now. So yeah, it's take care, everybody.